Before Hollywood knew how to handle the topic of race, or even wanted to, there was Sidney Poitier. Tall, composed, and impossibly charismatic, he didn't just act on screen, he embodied something bigger: progress, pride, and power at a time when the world refused to see a black man as any of those things. To understand Sidney Poitier is to understand the evolution of American cinema and a quiet, unstoppable revolution that began with a single man walking into a room full of closed doors and walking out with every one of them open. From Cat Island to the big screen, Sidney Poitier's story sounds like something out of a movie itself. Born in 1927 on Cat Island in the Bahamas, he was the son of tomato farmers who didn't even plan to have him born in the United States. But fate had other ideas. His mother went into labor early during a trip to Miami, and that accidental timing granted Poitier U.S. citizenship, a small twist of destiny that would later change not just his life, but American culture. Growing up in poverty, Poitier's childhood was simple. There was no electricity, no running water, and certainly no dreams of stardom. He didn't even see his first movie until he was around 10. When he finally moved to Nassau and later to Miami, the young Sidney encountered the harsh reality of racial segregation. It was his first bitter taste of how skin color could dictate opportunity in America. But even then, there was something defiant in him. Poitier refused to let the world tell him who he could be. At just 16, he headed to New York City, alone, broke, and barely literate. He washed dishes, slept in bus stations, and struggled to survive. But his hunger for more never died. He once said, "I knew I could be more than what society intended me to be." That belief was his guiding light. Barely in New York, he stumbled upon the American Negro Theater, which was holding auditions. Poitier went in, hopeful but terrified. His first audition, by his own admission, was a disaster. The director practically threw him out, mocking his thick Bahamian accent. But instead of giving up, Poitier went home and started teaching himself English by listening to the radio and mimicking news announcers. He practiced tirelessly. 6 months later, he came back to the same theater, and this time, he nailed it. That second chance changed everything. The stage became his classroom, his testing ground, and soon Hollywood began to take notice. Breaking into Hollywood on his own terms. Sidney Poitier's first major film role came in No Way Out, 1950, where he played a young doctor treating a racist white criminal. It wasn't just a part, it was a statement. For the first time, audiences saw a black man on screen who wasn't a servant, a sidekick, or a stereotype. Hollywood wasn't used to seeing black characters who had authority, intellect, and quiet strength. But that's exactly what Poitier radiated. His mere presence on screen challenged decades of prejudice. By the mid-1950s, he was starring in films like Blackboard Jungle, 1955, where he played a rebellious student in a troubled inner-city school. It was raw, honest, and electric, and suddenly people were paying attention. Then came The Defiant Ones, 1958. Poitier played a prisoner chained to a white convict, Tony Curtis, forced to rely on each other to survive. The movie exploded across America's racial fault lines. For his performance, Poitier became the first black man nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor. It was a milestone and a mirror reflecting America's complicated conscience. A symbol of dignity. What made Poitier different wasn't just his acting, it was his refusal to compromise his principles. Hollywood often offered him roles that were demeaning or stereotypical, and he turned them down even when he needed the money. "I couldn't play those parts," he said years later. "I had to live with myself." That decision came with a cost. For years, he took fewer roles than other stars, but the ones he did take mattered deeply. He chose characters who represented strength, intelligence, and self-respect, men who stood tall no matter the odds. And in doing so, he became something more than an actor. He became a symbol of dignity for Black America. The Year of Triumph, 1967. If there was one year that defined Poitier's career, it was 1967. That year, he released 3 films that would cement his place in cinematic history: To Sir, With Love, In the Heat of the Night, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. In To Sir, With Love, he played Mark Thackeray, a teacher who earns the respect of rebellious London students through sheer patience and grace. The movie was an instant hit, especially its theme song by Lulu, and made Poitier an international hero. Then came In the Heat of the Night, playing Virgil Tibbs, a black detective from Philadelphia, who ends up investigating a murder in a deeply racist Mississippi town. Poitier gave one of the most iconic performances of his life. The moment when a white plantation owner slaps Tibbs and Tibbs slaps him back was seismic. That single gesture sent shockwaves through American culture. It wasn't just a movie moment, it was a revolution captured on film. And then there was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where he played the fiancé of a white woman, forcing her liberal parents to confront their own hypocrisy. It was daring, elegant, and deeply human. 3 films, 1 year, one man who became the face of a changing world. More than an actor. Off-screen, Sidney Poitier was equally fearless. He was friends with Martin Luther King Jr. and participated in the civil rights movement, quietly donating money and lending his voice to the cause. But even as he became an icon, the weight of that position was heavy. He was often criticized, sometimes by younger black activists, for being too perfect, too clean-cut, too acceptable to white audiences. Poitier understood that tension deeply. He once said, "I was the only one out there. If I had gone down, it would have been harder for others to rise." He was walking a tightrope between representation and revolution, and doing it with grace few could match. A director, a father, a legacy. In the 1970s, Poitier turned to directing, and his films were just as thoughtful as his performances. He directed Buck and the Preacher, 1972, one of the first westerns with black leads, in Uptown Saturday Night, 1974, a hilarious buddy comedy that influenced later hits like Friday and Bad Boys. He also became a father to 6 daughters, including actress Sidney Poitier, and always emphasized family, education, and character over fame. Then in 2002, history came full circle. 74 years after his birth, the same academy that once excluded black actors awarded him an honorary Oscar. Standing before a room full of Hollywood's biggest stars, Poitier's voice trembled with emotion. He thanked the pioneers who came before him, those who had paved the way but never saw the glory. It was a moment of poetic justice, a tribute to the man who had turned barriers into stepping stones. The gentleman of Hollywood, Sidney Poitier, wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His power was in his stillness, his precision, his presence. When he spoke, people listened, not because he demanded attention, but because he earned it. His calm, deliberate tone carried the weight of generations who were told they didn't belong. Yet here he was, standing at the center of the stage, reminding the world that dignity can be the loudest protest of all. His influence rippled across decades. Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and countless others have called him their North Star, the man who showed them what was possible. Washington once said during his own Oscar acceptance speech, "I'll always be chasing you, Sidney." Sidney Poitier didn't just act in history, he made it.